What's up, my fellow economic detectives, and welcome back to Boss Economic World. The show that peels back the layers of financial jargon like an onion, makes you cry a little, but ultimately helps you see the truth. Today, we're talking about something you probably don't think about, but I guarantee you've consumed it in the last 24 hours. No, not existential dread, though that's a close second. We're talking about the humble soybean. This little legume is the unsung baseline of the global food economy. It's in your salad dressing, it's the tofu in your stir-fry, it's the feed for the chicken that became your nuggets, and it's even in the foam of your car seats. It is, for lack of a better term, the Kevin Bacon of agriculture. It's connected to everything. And right now, this tiny, protein-packed powerhouse has become a geopolitical superweapon. It's the year of our Lord 2025, the date is October 24th, and American farmers are sitting on a mountain of soybeans so colossal it could blanket the entire state of Arizona. It's a testament to American agricultural might. There's just one tiny, little, insignificant problem. Their number one customer, the one who buys with the enthusiasm of a teenager with a new credit card, has just ghosted them. That's right. China, the 800-pound gorilla of global commodity markets, has walked away from the table. And in doing so, they've turned a simple crop harvest into a high-stakes standoff between the world's two largest economies. So grab your popcorn, because we're about to untangle the Great Soybean Standoff. Let's set the scene. For years, the US-China soybean trade was a beautiful, symbiotic relationship. American farmers, with their incredible efficiency and vast plains, produced a tidal wave of beans. China, with its billion-plus population and a booming middle class demanding more meat, was the perfect, insatiable buyer. How perfect? Last year alone, China shelled out a cool $13 billion for American beans. That's more than 20% of the entire US crop. To put that in perspective, that's like if a single person was responsible for buying 1/5 of every iPhone Apple ever made. You don't just lose that customer. That customer is your business partner, your sugar daddy, and your emergency contact all rolled into one. But then, this past March, the music stopped. As part of the latest escalation in the long-simmering trade war, Beijing slapped retaliatory tariffs on a host of US farm goods, with soybeans right in the crosshairs. These weren't just "we're a little annoyed" tariffs. These were "don't let the door hit you on the way out" tariffs. They were so punitive that they effectively slammed the door on commercial imports before a single 2025 soybean plant had even flowered. The result? As of today, with the harvest in full swing, official records show that China has not booked a single commercial shipment from this fall's American bounty. Zero. Zilch. Nada. It's the economic equivalent of a silent treatment, and it's deafening. So why would China do this? It's not because they suddenly developed a national soy allergy. This is a calculated, strategic move. It's geopolitical chess played with tiny legumes. Beijing knows that American farmers are the heart of President Trump's political base. Squeeze the farmers, and you squeeze the president. It gives them immense leverage ahead of the big G20 summit next week, where Trump and Xi Jinping are scheduled to have a little chat. And the squeeze is working. Out in America's heartland, the mood is getting tense. Imagine you're Caleb Ragland, a farmer in Kentucky and the head of the American Soybean Association. You've spent your year nurturing this crop, battling weather, managing costs, and now you have a perfect product with nowhere to sell it. He put it diplomatically, saying, "There's a lot on the line, we're all better off when we are finding ways to work together." Translation: we voted for the guy, we support the America First idea in principle, but our livelihoods are currently rotting in silos, and we're feeling a lot less like patriots and a lot more like collateral damage in a fight we didn't start. Please, for the love of God, make a deal. This isn't just abstract economic theory. This is real pain. Down at the James Valley Grain Co-op in North Dakota, the general manager, Eric Larson, paints a stark picture. Normally, at this time of year, his facility is a beehive of activity. Shuttle trains loaded with soybeans are constantly rolling west to Pacific Northwest ports, destined for Asia. He said his entire regional infrastructure was built to load shuttle trains to go to the Asian market, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This year? He calls that business non-existent. The silence is so complete that for the first time in memory, not a single Chinese trade delegation visited his co-op during the harvest. Usually, he hosts several. "I miss talking with them," he says, with a frustration you can feel through the screen. His co-op managed to reroute a couple of trains to Mexico and another to Bangladesh, but that's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a teaspoon. It's a valiant effort, but it doesn't change the fact that you're drowning. The frustration is boiling over. Larson sums up the feeling of helplessness perfectly: all of this is geopolitical, that we have no control over. When a tweet comes out, it just makes it even worse. Of course, President Trump has noticed his base is hurting. His response has been, well, characteristically Trump. A few weeks ago, he took to his preferred social media platform, Truth Social, to declare Beijing's soybean boycott an economically hostile act. He's made restoring soy purchases a cornerstone of his demands for next week's meeting. He told reporters, "Our farmers have been boycotted by China as a negotiating point. I don't want that. I want them to start buying soybeans. You and about 500,000 farmers, Mr. President. The administration's other big move is financial aid. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins just announced the government would resume distributing $3 billion in aid from the Farm Service Agency, a program that was ironically paused by a federal shutdown. Now, let's call this aid what it is, a multi-billion-dollar, sorry for blowing up your biggest market check. And while farmers will reluctantly take it because bankruptcy is a poor negotiating position, it's not what they want. They're business owners, not welfare recipients. They want trade, not aid. They want to sell the product they poured their blood, sweat, and capital into, not receive a government handout funded by taxpayer dollars to compensate for a policy that's hurting them. As Illinois grower John Barkman, who's now 47 and remembers the brutal farm crisis of the 1980s, put it, what he's been trying to do has been absolutely terrible for the farming community. Our whole current system depends on one thing, and that's demand. If we don't have demand, then farm income goes down the toilet. He's right. The echoes of the 1980s, a toxic cocktail of inflation, high interest rates, and collapsed exports that wiped out a generation of family farms, are getting louder and louder in rural America. And even if, by some miracle, Trump and Xi shake hands next week and China agrees to buy, say, 10 million tons of soybeans as a goodwill gesture, it's too little, too late for this year's crop. Chinese processors, known as crushers, aren't sitting around waiting. They've already covered their supply needs for the rest of 2025 and are now booking shipments for 2026. They've moved on. This is where the story goes global. China isn't just boycotting the US, they're actively dating other suppliers. And their new dance partner of choice is Brazil. For years, Brazil has been the world's #2 soybean producer, always in the shadow of the US. Now, it's their time to shine. Chinese buyers are swarming Brazilian ports, signing long-term contracts, and investing in infrastructure. This isn't just a fling, it's a strategic realignment. Beijing's ultimate goal, one they've been working on for over a decade, is diversification. They never want to be this dependent on their primary geopolitical rival again. They've learned their lesson. Relying on the US for a strategic commodity like soybeans is, in their eyes, a critical vulnerability. The trade war just gave them the perfect excuse to accelerate their breakup plan. Now, this pivot isn't without risks for China. Brazilian soybeans are currently more expensive, and shipping them is a longer, costlier journey. They're also putting all their eggs in one South American basket, making them highly vulnerable to Brazilian weather patterns like droughts or floods. There's also the whipsaw risk. Soybean meal prices inside China are already sliding on speculation that a Trump-Xi deal could suddenly unleash a flood of cheap US beans back onto the market, crushing the margins of Chinese processors who overpaid for Brazilian supply. It's a delicate balancing act. But make no mistake, the long-term trajectory is clear. China is building a world where it doesn't need American soybeans. Interestingly, even the Brazilians are wary. Vanderlei Silva Atades, a farmer in the state of Para, welcomes the new business but sees a bigger problem on the horizon: global oversupply. With the US desperately trying to find new buyers and Brazil ramping up production to meet Chinese demand, he worries, I think we're growing too much soy, and there's too much of the stuff out there. When even the winner of the trade dispute is worried about the market, you know the system is under stress. So, what's the real takeaway here? This isn't just a story about beans. It's a story about the changing architecture of the global economy. For decades, we lived in a world built on the assumption of free-flowing trade. Efficiency was king. The US was the most efficient soybean producer, so the world, led by China, bought from the US simple. Now, the logic has shifted from efficiency to resilience. National security and supply chain stability have replaced pure market economics. The trade war that began under Trump's first term, simmered under Biden, and has now boiled over again has taught everyone a crucial lesson: relying on your rival is a dangerous game. Kurt Harmon, the CEO of Columbia Grain International, nailed the fundamental paradox for American agriculture. When such a large percentage of the US crop is export-based, he says, there are parts of an America First agenda that don't entirely work for agriculture. It's great to drive American production, but that production has got to go somewhere. You can't be the world's breadbasket and an isolationist at the same time. Even if a deal is reached next week, the damage is done. The trust has been broken. Chinese buyers will forever be wary of relying on the US, and they will continue to invest billions in Brazil, Argentina, and even African nations to diversify their supply. American farmers, in turn, will look at the Chinese market with suspicion, knowing a single tweet or policy change could evaporate it overnight. They'll try to pivot. Some are looking to plant more corn, others are hoping for a boom in soy-based biofuels, but these are slow, painful transitions that take years, not months. The Great Soybean Standoff of 2025 is more than just a trade dispute. It's a symptom of a much larger geopolitical realignment. It shows how interconnected our world is, how a political decision in Beijing can cause financial ruin on a farm in Illinois, and how a tool of economic prosperity, a simple soybean, can be weaponized in the blink of an eye. The farmers who are currently watching their profits wither in storage bins are the first economic casualties of this new era. They won't be the last. That's the real bottom line. What do you think? Is this a temporary spat or a permanent divorce? Can the US ever regain its status as China's top supplier? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay sharp and keep digging.